The rain had a strange way of falling that morning, slow, heavy drops that clung to the windows before sliding down like tears. Arthur Gray, a man whose hair had turned the same color as the clouds outside, stood by the window of his small Boston apartment and stared at the city half hidden in fog. He had been retired for almost 5 years now, though retirement never sat well with him. Men like Gray didn't stop thinking, and they didn't stop noticing things. He poured himself another cup of black coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt earth, and opened the letter lying on the kitchen table. It was thick, cream-colored paper with a familiar crest in the corner, a falcon perched on a branch. Marlowe Manor. He hadn't seen that emblem in 20 years. Dear Arthur, the letter began in neat, slanted handwriting. It has been too long. We are gathering again, just as we did before the war. Marlowe Manor still stands, though it feels emptier these days. I should be honored if you would join us this weekend. Henry Marlowe. Henry Marlowe. The name stirred memories Arthur thought he had buried long ago, days of brandy by the fire, laughter that didn't always hide the secrets beneath, and one summer when everything changed. Arthur folded the letter carefully, his mind racing. The Marlowes were old money, the kind of people who didn't invite you unless they needed something or unless something was already wrong. Still, curiosity had always been his greatest weakness. By Friday afternoon, Arthur found himself driving north, the gray Atlantic occasionally flashing through the trees. Marlowe Manor stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, its stone walls darkened by time and sea wind. When he pulled up to the gate, it was already half open, creaking on its hinges. "Welcome back, Mr. Gray," said the butler, a thin, solemn man named Whitby whom Arthur vaguely remembered. His face hadn't changed much, only grown more hollow. Inside, the manor was a museum of shadows and whispers. The chandelier still sparkled, though several bulbs had gone out. The scent of polish and sea salt lingered in the hall. "Mr. Marlowe is in the drawing room," Whitby said. "The others have arrived." The others. Arthur's pulse quickened slightly. He walked into the room where a fire was struggling to stay alive in the massive hearth. There, seated in deep leather chairs, were faces from another life. Henry Marlowe rose to greet him, a tall man with silver hair and eyes like a winter sky. "Arthur, my old friend. You came." Arthur shook his hand, noticing the tremor in Henry's fingers. "You always did know how to make an invitation sound like an order." Henry laughed softly, but there was sadness in it. "You'll remember the others, of course." Arthur did. Sitting near the window was Eleanor Blake, once the cleverest woman in any room, now wrapped in pearls and nostalgia. By the fireplace stood Colonel James Whitlock, retired Army, whose posture remained stiff as if the war hadn't ended. Near the bar was Vivian Reed, a glamorous singer from New York whose voice had once filled the manor with music. And in the corner, half hidden by the curtains, was Charles Benton, the lawyer, sharp eyes, smooth voice, and always calculating. Arthur nodded politely. "Quite the reunion." "Yes," Henry said quietly. "Though not all of us could make it." There was a pause. Everyone knew what he meant. Not all of us had survived the war. Dinner was served in the grand dining room. The table was laid with silver and crystal, the kind of formality that belonged to another century. Conversation began politely, but beneath the surface there was tension, a sense that each of them was waiting for something to happen. "So, Arthur," Colonel Whitlock said, carving his roast beef with military precision, "how does it feel to be out of the game, no more chasing criminals in the fog?" Arthur smiled faintly. "I find the fog still finds me, Colonel. It always does." Vivian laughed, low and throaty. You always did talk like a poet, Arthur. Or a detective in one of those radio dramas. Eleanor sipped her wine. And yet, wasn't it Arthur who found out what really happened to the Marlowe jewels all those years ago? Henry raised a hand. Let us not dig up ghosts tonight. We have so few pleasant ones left. But the damage was done. The air grew heavier. The rain began again outside, hammering against the windows like impatient fingers. After dinner, they moved to the library for brandy. The storm intensified, and by the time the clock struck 10, Whitby entered to announce that the road had flooded. No one could leave the manor until morning. Henry sighed. Then it seems fate wants us to stay together a little longer. Arthur stood by the window, watching lightning flash across the sea. Strange, he murmured, how fate always seems to arrive during a storm. Later that night, the manor grew quiet. The guests retired to their rooms. The fire in the library burned low. Arthur couldn't sleep. Something about the house felt wrong. Too many closed doors, too many whispered conversations that stopped when he entered the room. Around midnight, he decided to walk the halls. Old habits died hard. He passed the portrait gallery, where the eyes of ancestors followed him like silent witnesses. The storm outside was deafening, and once or twice he thought he heard footsteps that weren't his own. Then a sound. A crash from upstairs. Arthur froze. The corridor ahead was dark, the candlelight flickering. He hurried up the grand staircase, his pulse steady but alert. The door to Henry Marlowe's study was open. Inside, papers were scattered across the desk, the window flung wide to the storm. And on the carpet, lying motionless, was Henry himself. Arthur knelt beside him. Henry's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. There was no blood, but the brandy glass beside him was shattered. Whitby appeared in the doorway, pale as bone. Good heavens, is he? Arthur felt for a pulse. Nothing. He stood slowly. Get everyone. Now. Within minutes the rest of the guests gathered in the study, half dressed, half asleep, their faces ghostly in the lightning's flash. What happened? Vivian gasped. Arthur turned to them, voice calm but cold. Henry Marlowe is dead. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Dead, but how? Arthur looked down at the body, then at the shattered glass. That, he said quietly, is what I intend to find out. Outside, the storm roared louder. And inside Marlowe Manor, the doors locked themselves against the night. The body of Henry Marlowe was carried to the drawing room and laid upon the long velvet sofa, his face pale in the candlelight. The storm outside raged on, pounding the windows as if demanding entry. Arthur Gray stood near the fireplace, silent, hands clasped behind his back. He had seen death before, too much of it during the war, and plenty after, but this one felt heavier. It wasn't just the loss of an old acquaintance. It was the unmistakable scent of foul play. Whitby, the butler, wrung his hands nervously. Should we call the police, sir? The phone lines are down, Arthur said. You mentioned the road is flooded. No one's getting out tonight. Eleanor Blake looked shaken but composed. Are you suggesting we're trapped here with a murderer? Arthur turned his gaze toward her. I'm suggesting that Henry Marlowe didn't simply die of shock or old age. His glass was shattered, the window open despite the storm, and there's a faint scent of almonds in the air. Vivian gasped. Almonds, you mean? Cyanide, Arthur said flatly. A murmur swept through the room. Colonel Whitlock's jaw tightened. So someone poisoned him. But why and who in God's name would bring poison to a reunion dinner? That, Arthur said, is what we're going to find out. Until morning, no one leaves this house. I'll need everyone's cooperation. Charles Benton, the lawyer, frowned. You have no authority here, Gray. You're not with the police anymore. Arthur met his eyes coolly. No. But if you prefer, we can all sit quietly while whoever did this destroys the evidence. The silence that followed was heavy as the thunder overhead. Finally, Henry's sister Eleanor nodded. Do what you must, Arthur. Henry trusted you once. I will too. Arthur inclined his head. Then we begin with the obvious. Where was everyone at midnight? The questioning began. Vivian Reed spoke first, her hands trembling slightly around her cigarette. I was in my room, trying to sleep. The storm kept me awake. I didn't hear anything until Whitby screamed. Arthur studied her. The smoke curled between them like a lie. Did you see anyone in the hallway? No. But I thought I heard music faint, like someone humming. Music, Arthur repeated. What tune? Vivian frowned, thinking. Something old. I'll be seeing you, maybe. It used to be Henry's favorite. Arthur made a note in his mind. Colonel Whitlock went next, standing as if still on parade. I was in the billiard room, cleaning my revolver. Habit from the service. I have no reason to kill Marlowe, Gray. He was a friend. Was Arthur asked softly. Whitlock's eyes narrowed. We had our differences. That's no secret. He invested in a business venture I warned him against, cost me a small fortune when it failed. But that was years ago. Arthur nodded slowly. And yet you still came. A gentleman doesn't refuse an invitation from an old comrade. Eleanor Blake spoke next, her voice trembling only slightly. Henry wasn't himself lately. He was forgetful, anxious. He said someone was writing him letters, anonymous ones. He didn't tell me what they said. Arthur's brow furrowed. Do you have any of those letters? I'm not sure. Perhaps in his study. Arthur looked toward the door of the study where Henry had died. We'll check that later. Charles Benton leaned back in his chair, eyes glinting behind his spectacles. For the record, I was in the library reviewing Henry's papers. He asked me to update his will. That caught Arthur's attention. His will? Yes. He planned to change the beneficiary. Benton adjusted his tie. But he hadn't signed it yet. Who was the beneficiary before the change? Eleanor, Benton replied. His sister. But he told me he meant to name someone else. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Who? Benton hesitated. He didn't say. Only that it would cause a stir. Vivian let out a soft laugh that didn't reach her eyes. That sounds like Henry. Always loved a bit of drama. Arthur turned to Whitby, who had been standing quietly in the corner. And you, Mr. Whitby, where were you? The butler swallowed hard. In the kitchen, sir. Preparing a tray of tea for Mrs. Blake. She wasn't feeling well. Arthur's gaze didn't waver. Did you serve Henry any drink before he died? Whitby shook his head quickly. No, sir. Mr. Marlowe poured his own brandy after dinner. I only refilled the decanter earlier. Arthur studied him for a moment, then nodded. Very well. No one leaves their rooms tonight. In the morning, we'll examine the study. Dash dash. Later, after the others had gone, Arthur remained in the drawing room. The fire burned low, and the scent of smoke mingled with that faint trace of almonds. He stood over Henry's still form, thinking. Cyanide. Quick, brutal, unmistakable. But how had it been administered? The glass was broken, perhaps to hide the residue. And the open window a distraction, or a clue? He searched Henry's jacket pockets and found a folded note. The paper was damp, but the words were legible: "You can't hide forever. Justice comes for all of us." No signature. Arthur frowned. Anonymous threats. Just as Eleanor had said. He pocketed the note and went to the study. The room was in disarray, the storm wind having scattered papers across the floor. Among them, a small black notebook caught his eye. Henry's handwriting, neat and deliberate. Inside were entries written over the past month. Dreams again. The fire, the voices. Whitlock knows. I must tell Arthur. Received another letter. This one mentions the necklace. How could they know? If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Arthur exhaled slowly. The necklace. He remembered it now, the infamous Marlowe necklace, a priceless heirloom stolen decades ago and later mysteriously returned. There had always been rumors it was a fake, that the real one had been lost during the war. And if Henry had discovered the truth, Arthur closed the book just as lightning flashed again, illuminating something glinting beneath the desk. He bent down and retrieved it, a small piece of glass, curved like a vial stopper. Poison container, perhaps. Or perfume. As he examined it, he heard footsteps behind him. Still playing detective, Arthur. He turned to see Eleanor standing in the doorway, a shawl draped around her shoulders. Old habits die hard, he said. She stepped closer, her face drawn. Henry trusted you. You'll find out who did this, won't you? I intend to. She hesitated, then added softly, be careful. Everyone here has something to hide. Even me. Arthur met her gaze. Then we'll start with that tomorrow. Eleanor left, and the room fell silent again except for the whisper of rain. Arthur looked once more at the vial in his hand. It still carried a faint scent, almonds, unmistakable and deadly. He turned toward the window where the curtains fluttered like restless ghosts. Somewhere in the dark house, a floorboard creaked. Arthur set the vial on the desk, extinguished the lamp, and whispered to himself, whoever you are, you've made your first mistake. Outside, the sea crashed against the cliffs, and the storm showed no sign of stopping. The storm had passed by dawn, but the manor still seemed wrapped in its shadow. Mist clung to the gardens like a ghost that refused to leave. Arthur Gray had slept little. He sat in the library with a cup of coffee gone cold, watching the light struggle through the rain-streaked windows. Somewhere upstairs, footsteps echoed, nervous, hurried, human. Whitby entered quietly. Breakfast is ready, sir. Though. He hesitated. No one seems very hungry. I imagine not, Arthur said. Tell everyone to gather here instead. We'll continue our discussion. Within the hour, the surviving guests assembled again, pale, drawn, and wary of each other. The air smelled faintly of smoke and fear. Arthur remained standing, his tone calm but firm. Henry Marlowe was poisoned. The cyanide was most likely slipped into his drink after dinner. The question now is who had the chance. Vivian crossed her arms. Anyone could have done it. We all had brandy that night. Arthur nodded. True, but not all of you poured from the same bottle. He gestured to Whitby. "Show them." The butler placed the decanter on the table. Inside, the amber liquid glimmered innocently. Arthur held up a small glass vial, the one he had found in the study. This was under Henry's desk. It once held something toxic. Likely cyanide. Charles Benton adjusted his glasses. "You're certain?" Arthur's reply was measured. "I've smelled it before. In cases that ended poorly." Eleanor shuddered. "So, someone brought poison with them. That means..." "That means," Arthur interrupted, "this was planned." He turned to Vivian. "You mentioned you heard music last night. I'll be seeing you." "Yes," she said softly. "I thought it was in my head. Henry used to play it on the gramophone." Arthur looked toward the corner where an old phonograph stood. He wound the handle, set the needle, and the familiar melody filled the room, haunting and nostalgic. Then he lifted the needle halfway through. Strange. Someone left it half played. Perhaps the killer needed noise to cover their steps. Colonel Whitlock frowned. "You think someone poisoned him during the song?" "Possibly," Arthur said. "The sound would have masked the clink of glass or the opening of a vial." Eleanor's voice trembled. "But who would do such a thing to Henry? He was kind, generous." Arthur gave her a long look. "Kind, perhaps. But generosity often hides debts. He was being blackmailed, wasn't he?" Eleanor froze. How did you know?" Arthur took the note from his pocket and placed it on the table. "He kept this in his jacket. Anonymous threats. He wrote about them in his notebook. Someone here wanted something from him or wanted him silenced." Silence fell. Finally, Charles Benton sighed. "All right. Yes, he confided in me about the letters. He wanted to change his will because of them. He feared someone close to him was behind it?" "Who?" Arthur asked. "I don't know," Benton said, though his eyes flicked briefly toward the colonel. Arthur caught it. "Colonel Whitlock, did Henry owe you money?" Whitlock's jaw tightened. "He did. A considerable sum. But I wasn't blackmailing him, Gray. I confronted him openly about it years ago." "Yet you were found cleaning your revolver last night," Arthur said softly. "A curious pastime during a thunderstorm." Whitlock's cheeks reddened. "I always clean my weapon before bed. Habit. Ask anyone who served." Vivian exhaled sharply. "This is absurd. You're accusing everyone in turn." Arthur turned to her. "And you, Miss Reed, you were once very close to Henry, weren't you?" Vivian's lipstick curved into a sad smile. "Once. A long time ago. But he married someone else. I moved on." Arthur's gaze sharpened. "And yet you still wear his locket." Her hand went instinctively to her throat. It's just jewelry." "May I see it?" She hesitated, then unclasped it and handed it over. Arthur opened the small golden heart, and inside was not a photograph, but a tiny folded note. He unfolded it carefully. The words, written in Henry's hand, read, "You were right. The necklace is gone. The copy fooled them all." Arthur's eyes met hers. "When did he give you this?" Vivian's voice dropped to a whisper. "A week ago. He said he'd uncovered something dangerous. He told me to keep it safe." "The necklace again," Benton muttered. "That damned family treasure." Arthur nodded slowly. "So the rumors were true. The original Marlowe necklace was never returned. It was replaced with a fake." Whitby looked startled. Then where is the real one? Arthur's expression darkened. That's what Henry intended to tell me. He wrote as much in his notebook. But someone stopped him. Later, Arthur examined Henry's study once more. Morning light fell across the desk, illuminating a half-burned document in the fireplace. Using tongs, he retrieved it carefully. The edges were blackened, but some lines remained legible. Transfer of ownership, necklace held as collateral. J. Whitlock. Arthur's jaw tightened. He turned as the colonel entered behind him. Looking for something, Whitlock asked. Arthur showed him the paper. Care to explain why your name is on a document about the necklace? Whitlock sighed. Henry and I made a private agreement years ago. I lent him money. He gave me the necklace as security. But when I tried to claim it, he swore it had been stolen. I didn't believe him. So you came here to confront him again, Arthur said. Whitlock's eyes flashed. I came here to get the truth. Not to kill him. Arthur studied him for a long moment. Perhaps. But truth has a way of killing on its own. He turned away, pocketing the burned paper. Don't leave the manor grounds. By afternoon, the fog began to lift. Arthur walked the cliffs behind the manor, thinking. The sound of the sea below was constant, relentless. Somewhere in that rhythm lay the pulse of the case: greed, betrayal, revenge. He stopped near a small tool shed, noticing footprints in the wet earth, small, elegant, distinctly feminine. They led to the shed door. Inside, he found an empty tin labeled potassium cyanide, photography use only. Arthur frowned. Photography. Back inside the manor, he sought out Vivian. She sat by the piano, absently touching the keys. You once had a darkroom, didn't you? He asked. She looked up sharply. Yes. I still do, in New York. I used to take Henry's portrait every summer. Why? Arthur showed her the tin. Because someone brought this from your supplies. Her face went pale. That's mine. But I didn't bring it here, I swear it. Then someone else did, Arthur said quietly. And they wanted us to think it was you. Vivian's hands trembled. Arthur, what if it wasn't about the necklace? What if it was about what happened before the war? Arthur studied her face. What happened? She hesitated, then whispered, Henry betrayed someone. One of us. It destroyed their life. Who? She looked toward the window, where the gray sea stretched endlessly. You'll find out soon enough. Before Arthur could press her further, a cry echoed from the upper floor. Whitby's voice, frantic, Mr. Gray. Quick, Mrs. Blake. Arthur ran up the staircase 2 at a time. In Eleanor's room, the curtains billowed in the sea wind, the window open wide again. Eleanor lay unconscious on the floor, a glass spilled beside her. Arthur knelt, checking her pulse. Faint, but present. Get water, he ordered Whitby. He sniffed the air. The faint, unmistakable scent of almonds again. Poison, he murmured. But not enough to kill. Someone wanted to silence her, not end her. Whitby stared in horror. Then, the murderer's still here. Arthur's eyes hardened. Oh, yes. And they're getting desperate. He looked toward the hallway, where the others had gathered in fear and confusion. Lock every door, he said coldly. No one leaves this house again, not until I find who's playing this deadly game. Outside, thunder rumbled once more, distant but returning. and inside Marlowe Manor, the walls themselves seemed to hold their breath. The storm had quieted by morning, leaving behind only the low hum of the sea and the damp smell of decay in the air. The grand house that had seemed so full of voices and secrets now felt hollow, as if the walls themselves were waiting for an ending. Inspector Collins arrived from Portland just after dawn, his boots muddy, his face stiff from the cold wind. He was a young man, too young, Arthur thought, to understand the kind of sin that ripens slowly over decades. "I understand you've kept everyone inside," Collins said as he stepped into the drawing room, his notebook already open. Arthur, standing near the fire, nodded. "No one has left since the night of the murder. You'll find your suspect among them." Collins glanced toward the group: Evelyn Marlowe, pale but composed, Harold Dunn with his restless hands, and Mrs. Whitby, whose eyes darted between them like a trapped bird's. "And you?" Collins asked. "You're not a guest anymore, Mr. Gray." Arthur gave a thin smile. "I'm only a man who once made a living seeing what others preferred to ignore." When the formal questioning began, Arthur watched from a chair by the window, the light catching the faint pattern of frost on the glass. He had already pieced the puzzle together, not from evidence in the obvious sense, but from tones of voice, glances withheld, the way Evelyn's hand trembled not at the mention of death, but of debt. "Let's start with motive," Arthur said quietly when Collins paused. "We know Henry Marlowe was blackmailing someone. He had letters, financial, perhaps political. But they're missing now, aren't they?" Evelyn's face turned sharply toward him. "What are you implying?" "That you weren't the target of his schemes. You were his partner." Her lips parted, a flicker of shock or anger, it was hard to tell which. "You helped him," Arthur continued. "The house, the debts, the invitations. But something went wrong. He pushed too far. He threatened someone who had nothing left to lose." Collins frowned. "And who would that be?" Arthur turned his gaze to Harold Dunn. "You, Mr. Dunn." Harold stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "That's absurd. I was his friend." "Once," Arthur said. "But you were also the man who signed away his patent rights to Marlowe Industries in 1929. You lost everything: your company, your marriage, your health. Henry kept you close so you'd never forget who owned you." Harold's face twisted with bitterness. He deserved worse than what he got. Arthur stepped forward, voice calm, steady. "He got exactly what you planned for him, didn't he? You waited until everyone was asleep. You went to his study. But he was ready for you. The two of you struggled, and the poker by the hearth became your only ally. The room was silent except for the crackle of the fire. You didn't mean to kill him," Arthur said softly. "You only wanted to stop the blackmail. You burned the letters afterward. That's what the smell of smoke was in the corridor." Harold's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him. He looked around, as if seeing the room for the first time. I thought if he was gone, I'd finally have peace." Evelyn let out a quiet, strangled cry. Collins stepped forward to take Harold's arm. Arthur turned away. He'd seen it too many times: men who mistook silence for freedom, only to find it haunted them louder than guilt ever could. By noon, the inspector's men had taken Harold away. The others packed in silence, their belongings small and insignificant against the vastness of the house. Evelyn stopped Arthur by the door. "Do you think it's over now?" she asked. He looked past her, at the gray sea stretching into fog. "It's never over. Not really. But the truth, It keeps the ghosts quieter. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. You always had a way of finding the darkness, Arthur. He gave a faint smile. That's because I used to live there. The carriage waited by the gate. The wind had picked up again, carrying the cry of distant gulls. Arthur turned for one last look at Marlowe Manor, its windows black, its gardens drowned in mist. He thought of the years he'd spent chasing truth as if it were some rare jewel, only to discover it was made of broken glass. As he walked away, the sea roared behind him, the sound like applause or warning, he couldn't decide which. He pulled his coat tighter and muttered to himself, another storm, another secret buried. But the dead, they always find a way to speak again. And with that, Arthur Gray vanished down the winding road, leaving Marlowe Manor to its silence, a house heavy with memory, and a story that would live only in whispers.